So thank you very much for joining us on this dark and stormy evening. For me, I'm Andy Tucker. I'm the MD at Naturetrek. This brings back memories for me of hosting a lot of these during the dark days of COVID. And building up to this winter, we were asking ourselves in the office, shall we go for a third consecutive winter of Zoom talks, or shall we go back to our old regime of evenings around the country at hotel venues? And we decided to do a mix. I think a lot of you have appreciated these evenings, being able to curl up on your sofa at home, not have to drive down an icy lane to find a hotel. So it's good for us, I think, this winter to offer a choice. You can either come to see us at a hotel venue around the country, or stay snuggled up on your sofa and join us on Zoom. So really good to have you with us. I'm joined this evening by four of our freelance tour leaders. I'll quickly introduce them. Lara Broom worked in the Naturetrek office for 3 or 4 years, but moved back to her native Portugal. She joins us tonight from a fishing village just to the west of Lisbon, and she'll be talking about her home country passionately later on. So great to see you again, Lara. Thanks for joining us. Neil McMahon, one of our regular tour leaders, he's up in the East Midlands near Northampton this evening. Neil's going to be talking to us about Iceland first up this evening. Simon Woolley, he's Hampshire based like I am. He's had the brunt of the storm though today down in the New Forest, so it's touch and go whether Simon's was going to be able to join us because of power cuts down there in southern Hampshire. So good to have you with us, Simon. He'll be talking to us about the French Pyrenees last up this evening. And then looming out of the mist there, if you can see Andy Bunton on the right of your screen, he's another of our freelance tour leaders after a long career in the RSPB. Andy joined us from Hexham in Northumberland this evening. And we think we thought he might have some condensation on his webcam, but apparently that's not the case, and he's going to do some investigation afterwards. So good to have you with us, Andy, from the northeast this evening. He'll be talking to us about Cyprus. Now, during the pandemic, with lots of these webinars, we focused on our most popular destinations. We did a lot on Spain and Ecuador and Colombia and places like that. And revisiting these Zoom webinars this winter, we wanted to cast the net a bit wider and bring you some destinations we haven't previously covered. So I do hope you enjoy this evening's presentations on those 4 destinations. We've got people joining us tonight from, well, lots in the UK, obviously, but we've got people from New Zealand all the way across to North America and the west coast of the USA. So great to have you with us wherever you're joining us from. I'm in North Hampshire, just near Basingstoke. I'm 20 minutes drive from the Naturetrek office. It's a dark and cold evening out there this evening, but we have missed the brunt of the storm, which is further south in the Channel Islands. And we will do the 2 talks, then have a 10-minute break, and then Simon and Lara will finish off the evening after the break. So without further ado, do use the chat section if you have any comments and questions. I'll be putting those to the guys later on. And we'll start off straight with you then, Neil, diving into Iceland.
Thank you, Andy, and a very good evening to everybody. I have the privilege of kicking off this evening, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Iceland, this amazing country to the north of us. And it doesn't matter where you are in the UK, flight-wise, you're only about 2.5 or 3 hours away from Iceland. So it's a really quite convenient English-speaking country. It's well organised. It's very, very much up for the eco-tourist. The road systems are very good. The hotels are lovely and warm, full of geothermal activity to keep us nice and warm. So it's the ideal place to be. We're not going to talk about the weather because the weather's something entirely different, but Iceland is a choice location. The Iceland flag is blue for the ocean, white for the snow, red for the fire, the volcano activity. And Naturetrek actually runs several trips during the year, and the earlier trips sort of around about February, March time. Not surprisingly, we'll see quite wintry conditions. The glaciers are there all year round, and of course Iceland houses the largest glacier in Europe. But anytime you go, you can always see a little bit of snow, a little bit of ice, and some wonderful, wonderful scenery. The earlier trips tend not to see much in the way of small birds, and indeed the snow bunting is really the only small passerine we see in good numbers on this occasion, of course, trying to get some warmth off this roof. Most of the photographs you see are mine. There was 1 or 2 others, which I will mention as we go along. When you're in Iceland, and if you think you've seen a crow, it's going to be a raven. It's the only sort of corvid that's common there, and they are quite numerous. And when you see how cold the conditions are there in the winter, you realize how tough some of these birds must be. The black guillemot is probably fairly familiar to many people in its sort of dark plumage with white white wing flashes. But in the winter, some of them go this gorgeous white or silver color. So what an opportunity to see something like that in the middle of winter. Purple sandpipers are one of many shorebirds that flock to Iceland. Although there's a breeding population of waders, there's also a significant wintering one as well. And the purple sandpiper, albeit scarce in the UK, is pretty common in Iceland and relatively easy to see. A lot of the early trips, February, March time, we look at see if we can see the northern lights with varying degrees of success, but we've had quite a lot of success in recent years. But the big highlight for me is to see these beasts, the orca or the killer whale. And I think many of us, when we're traveling naturalists, we think about how we love to see an elephant or a tiger or a leopard or something. But for me, the orca, the killer whale, is pretty much as good as it gets. And what we try to do on the early trips, February, March time, is get out onto a boat, one of the whale watching boats, get out into one of the big fjords and try and encounter some of these amazing pods of killer whales. Sometimes 3 or 4 pods hunting together, chasing the herring down and pretty much totally ignoring us. So if you really want to see one of the most dramatic animals in the world, this is definitely one of the best places to go. The bird that everybody wants to see, but it's a tricky one, is the gyrfalcon. I managed to photograph this one just as it had flown up with a little bit of ptarmigan in its talons. So, yeah, the winter is a proper winter scene, and we always use 9-seater minibuses when we're traveling around Iceland. In the winter months, we tend to have proper tires, proper winter tires, which provides us an opportunity of getting around, even in some of the worst conditions. Iceland represents an opportunity for photography, and even now the conditions sometimes are a little bit grey, a little bit grainy. Most photographers love the opportunity of taking photographs of landscape photographs. And of course, Iceland is a relatively young country. It was only populated about 1100 years ago by the Vikings. It still only has a population of less than 400,000, of which at least 60% still live in the capital and away from the country areas. So it's unspoiled. We haven't ruined this country yet. It's a marvelous place to go to see nature in the raw, really, with lava beds, mountains, glaciers, black sand beaches, icebergs. It's so dramatic. And of course, we have this geothermal activity, which you can smell as well as see. And a colleague of mine, Dave Jackson, who goes to Iceland more than me, he's had various opportunities of seeing some additional stuff, which I'll come on to. It's definitely a place of waterfalls. Some of the most powerful waterfalls in Europe are open all year round. They're even more dramatic, possibly in February and March when they're all iced up, but still hugely impressive. We have an opportunity going around pseudo craters and also the big calderas of the big volcanoes, such as this one near Lake Mitavan. And Dave actually managed to photograph this amazing scene. This actually happened during a Naturetrek tour when, quite rightly, he changed the itinerary and captured this image of a recent volcano eruption. We don't get that close because we're from Naturetrek. But at the end of the day, what an opportunity and what a scene that he had before him. Of course, the wildlife is there in profusion. Birds are there in large numbers, not huge numbers of species in the spring, but we've got lots and lots of redwings, Icelandic redwings, and the common snipe are drumming all over the place, all over the moors, and all over the areas of the wilder parts of the island. Breeding waders come in large numbers, so golden plovers use the moors and the heather areas to breed in large numbers, birds that we often only see at a distance during the winter. Lake Mitavan and other such places are the location for marvellous views of some of our more difficult to see ducks in Britain. So the long-tailed duck comes to breed in places such as this. And if you like redneck phalaropes, there's no better place. And these things are just wandering around at your feet. So if you like little beautiful, very, very chirpy little birds that come towards you, then it's definitely the place for you, and excellent photographic opportunities. So some of the ducks, Barrow's goldeneye. Iceland represents the only European outpost for seeing a Barrow's goldeneye. It's essentially a North American duck. And the Axa River provides our best opportunity, a place that we go to on all the spring trips to see the Harlequin duck as well as the Barrow's goldeneye. A marvellous river, completely unspoilt. And with the big hatch of flies that occurs late in June, this is why these ducks go there, in order to ensure that their ducklings have plenty to feed on. If you're a laryngophile, if you're a bit of a gull specialist, then I suppose the glaucous gull is the one you want to see. And it's in summer plumage and it breeds in reasonable numbers. Strangely enough, the Iceland gull is actually quite rare in Iceland. It's there as a winter visitor. Only very few pairs actually breed there. So any big white-winged gull you're going to see in Iceland tends to be the glaucous gull. So what's the food like in Iceland? Well, I'm not putting ptarmigan up there just to talk about food, but the food in Iceland is surprisingly good. People are a little bit concerned when they hear about fermented shark or whale meat and even eating puffins. But what we found in our recent tours is the vegetarians are well catered for. Gluten-free is well catered for as well. Still a bit of an issue about vegans. So people who are following that trait still struggling to try and get some food in Iceland. But in general, very healthy diet, very good food, good quality. And of course, with the geothermal activity, they're growing a lot of their own vegetables themselves. Female ptarmigan then did a bit of dust bathing, followed by the male. And this actually took place in a hotel car park, can you believe? No climbing mountains here. These birds are at sea level. So if you want to see some lovely birds close to, why not come to Iceland and see a ptarmigan? Seabirds, particularly numerous in the breeding season, black-legged kittiwake or kittiwake. You'll see those in good numbers, and even in the winter, they are there in their tens of thousands feeding on the very fish-rich waters around the coast. On our spring trips, we make every effort to go out on a small ferry to the Isle of Flatty. That's not just the isle on the left-hand side, that's just a rock. But on the Isle of Flatty, not only do we see good views of birds, but we get extra close to them. So again, a photographic wonderment really of redshanks, whimbrel, Arctic terns, and a variety of other birds right down at your feet. So again, what a wonderful opportunity to see these gorgeous things, completely unconcerned about our presence. And there are a few places, I think, in the world where you can see this kind of detail on wading birds. So I've talked a lot about birds. I've talked a little bit about food. I'm not going to mention the weather. The weather can be quite variable, but generally not as cold as wet as people often consider. The only native land animal is this little chap, which is the Arctic fox. And we do get the white varieties, the dark varieties, and the blue varieties. We don't see many of these. And in fact, if you read the book, it says that we shouldn't really be seeing them on our tours. And they are supposed to be off to the west. But Naturetrek being Naturetrek, we have been seeing Arctic foxes on all our trips now. And so as a consequence, we actually now realize they're all over the country. The Icelandic people are very, very proud of their, what they call Icelandic horses. They're ponies really, but they call them Icelandic horses. And this is almost a form of currency. You'll see these horses out in all weathers, very hardy beasts, and they're very highly prized. Interestingly, although the horses are out all year round, the sheep, the cattle, and the pigs you just don't see during the winter. They're all barned up, and lamb stew is definitely one of the favoured meals or favoured dishes in Iceland. So I'm sorry, little lamb, but your days may be numbered. But yeah, certainly in the summer you'll see lots of sheep joining the other animals. There are some reindeer in the east of the country which have been introduced, and they're spreading. There are mink in the country which shouldn't be there, and there are wood mice that have become super wood mice. But really, there are no other mammals other than the sea mammals. Yes, that's another glaucous gull. That's only because I'm a laryngophile myself. On the spring trips, we make every effort to try and find you some puffins. There are several colonies we can go to, which normally afford really good views. And there are other auks and cliff nesting birds as well, such as these marvelous fulmars, which just ride those wind thermals so well. If you like your ducks, you'll probably like your geese. Pink-footed geese nest in quite good numbers. We get nice and close to them. Barnacle geese, grey-lag geese are there as well. And the paler phase of the Brent goose, the pale-bellied Brent goose, move through migration in the hundreds and thousands. What's not to like about this bird? Lake Mitavan in particular gives you an ample opportunity to get very close to breeding water birds, and they're so used to people that they just don't care. They're really not concerned about your presence. And again, even a mobile phone will take a really good photograph of one of these gorgeous little Slavonian grebes. There's an opportunity of seeing some of the people culture around the country as well. So lots of really good museums. In Reykjavik itself, this is a cathedral. Lots of other things to do other than just wildlife and seeing the amazing landscape. Very proud people, obviously sort of from a Nordic background, now very independent, and they very much seem to have got over the 2009 financial crash. Everywhere you go, it's credit cards. It's very convenient, and almost cash is sort of frowned upon when you produce it. Sea mammals, we looked at orca, the harbour seal or the common seal, which is very similar to our animal. That's quite common around the coast areas. But of course, the other animals we want to see is some more cetaceans, please. So what we tend to do later in the year in the spring trips is try and get out to Husavik, which is in the north of the country. And we will endeavour to get out into a lovely big bay, which has got nearly always some big whales which are in it feeding. So this boat you can see is a little bit small, is the more typical mode of transport that we use out there. We've also been using sail ships, a tall ship that's currently being serviced, but normally you use that, which is a nice silent craft and gets us out there in amongst it. And this is what we want to see. This is the big, wonderful humpback whale. Of all the big whales, perhaps the humpback whale is the one that actually really performs for us. We do get an opportunity on most occasions to get very close to these big animals as they just cavort in front of us, really don't care about us being there at all. And yes, they're just showing off another fluke. So absolutely gorgeous animals. It's a privilege to be close to them. And whilst we're out there, if there aren't any humpback whales, because they're not there all the time, there's always a chance of minke whales. We've had white-beaked dolphins, harbour porpoises, and quite recently a stunning view of a blue whale which came into the bay as well. So a big part of these trips is trying to get in on the whale watching trips, and it's normally one of the highlights of our tours out there. Just a few images of some of the birds there. We talked about some of the seabirds. To be in amongst a colony of 1,000 Arctic terns is always a wondrous thing. Unlike some places in the UK, these birds don't seem to really attack you. They just simply accept you. It's a little bit different to these in the UK. And these wonderful sort of swallows of the sea, of course, have that reputation of flying from the Antarctic to the Arctic just for us to see and value them. Iceland is the venue for many birds to come to breed, but it's actually also a place where things pass through. So the sanderlings in summer plumage will be on its way to the high Arctic. Turnstones will be following them as well. And there's even an opportunity of getting sort of passing birds such as the sabines go on its way to Svalbard or somewhere like that. In Iceland, as in many places in the UK, eider down is still collected, so you'll find that there are little flags all over little bay areas and coastal areas, signifying people protecting the eiders to produce the eider down. But there's still enough eider down to incubate the eggs and to produce the ducklings. And eiders are very much protected all the way around the coast of Iceland, and we always have fabulous views of them. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Had to put another redneck phalarope in there. Lovely female. This one isn't sitting on a nest. She actually came and walked right up to my feet, and I had to walk 3 foot backwards to get away from her. It's a strange behaviour when you see the females rushing around trying to mate with the males, because of course in the gender wars, it's the female that's the dominant bird of the two. Photographers amongst us will always want to get the photograph of the snipe on the fence post or on the wall, and here there is an opportunity for that to happen. So yes, we do make efforts to try and use the minibuses as mobile hives to try and get as close as we can to our favourite subjects. And who doesn't love a redwing, particularly a redwing with a youngster in tow? So the Icelandic redwings breed in large numbers, not just in trees and willows and dwarf birches, etc., but also in the lupin beds. So there's lots of bright lupins there in the spring, which are not a native flower, but nevertheless have spread all around the island. Waders I mentioned already, but what can be better than a gorgeous Icelandic race black-tailed godwit? And these are quite numerous, and we do see good numbers of these. I mentioned ducks, so I showed you a picture of a long-tailed duck, Barrow's golden-eye, but there's surface-feeding ducks there as well, and the widgeon and the pintail and a whole variety of other birds that are there, particularly around Lake Mittervan. Passerines are a little bit few and far between. This is the Icelandic common redpoll. Bird that's quite difficult to see outside Iceland. Just finishing off the last couple of slides, but I couldn't resist putting a wonderful great northern diver in. And in Iceland, there are some very large freshwater lakes. which provide breeding opportunities for these wonderful yodeling great northern divers with that gorgeous deep red eye. Absolutely stunning birds. And on all the spring trips, we tend to see these in rather good numbers, all in resplendent summer plumage. And on the smaller lakes, particularly the small areas of water alongside the road, red-throated divers abound as well, and they nest in some profusion. I'm sure they don't think much of the Arctic foxes which are wandering around, but nevertheless, the red-throated divers seem to produce good numbers of young. So I'm just going to sort of conclude with just a few sort of significant well, messages really about Iceland. Yes, the weather can be a little bit tricky. It can be a little bit breezy, it can be a little bit cool. Even in the summer, you can get the occasional snow flurry. But at the same time, just like in the UK, you can get long periods of sunshine as well. Blue skies, huge vistas, amazing, amazing views. And if you're really fortunate, and I was fortunate on this occasion once, you get a cracking view of a gyrfalcon whizzing past, Iceland's national bird. So I think I'm just about done there. I'm sure there'll be one or two questions which I'll try and answer later on. But at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Andy, and Andy's going to talk about another island, perhaps a fairly similar size to Iceland, but of course it's the island of Cyprus. So Andy, if you're there, I'll stop there.
Here we go. So I'm going to be talking about Cyprus, and as I'm sure you know, Naturetrek lead a number of Cyprus trips, 5 in all, a go slow in an island of Cyprus in March, and then a Cyprus at Christmas. There's a spring in northern Cyprus, which dovetails pretty well in with the end of the island of Cyprus trip. And then there's a wonderfully titled The Autumn Flowers of Aphrodite's Isle. Now, I've been doing these Cyprus trips, the go slow in the island of Cyprus and the Christmas Cyprus trips for some years now. And they're absolutely wonderful. If you are working with Naturetrek, sometimes you can snaffle a trip and hang on to it with grim death. And I do that for my go slow and island Cyprus ones for sure, because they're in March. And come February, which can be anybody who has a birthday in February, you're really looking forward to the spring, and you get an accelerated spring when you come to Cyprus. There's warmth, there's sun, there's birds, there's fun, and there's gaiety. It's all very good fun. It'll be better fun if my PowerPoint works. And there we go. That's the end of that one. It doesn't seem to be operating. Jolly good. Well, there we are. I was so full of optimism that this was going to operate, and you were going to see a wonderful picture. Blimey. Well, I don't know. I'm hoping that you can see this. I can now.
Yeah, we're on to the map, Andy, now. Yeah.
Thank God. Okay. Right. I hope you're not doing anything until midnight, people. Oh, we've moved. Now we've moved backwards and forwards. It's I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've given a talk in the old days when you had slides, and you were walking confidently up to the podium, and then you tripped and fell over, and all the slides went over the floor. This is sort of an equivalent. This is the go slow trip to Cyprus. We fly into Paphos, as you can see, and then the whole area takes place just on this western part of Cyprus. We never travel very far. We have 2 places, 2 hotels to stay in, Paphos and up at the top there near the Baths of Aphrodite. They're not very far between them. The longest trip we do is down to the Akrotiri Salt Lake, and that is a great trip. When we arrive, we are met by our bus, and it's an excellent bus because unlike so many buses, it's got clear windows, and so you can see out of them, and you can actually move the windows back and take photographs, and that is very helpful. The driver who comes with us, a chap called Doros, is fantastic. He's done all of my Cyprus trips. He almost instinctively knows when to stop and when to go around the corner carefully. And also he manages to get through the tiny little villages with a bus full of people, which I would be slightly worried about cycling through. And their center screen is the wonderful Yanis. Now, Yanis is the guy who I have led the trip with since I started. He is a botanist, but he is more than a botanist. He is a polymath. He's a polyglot as well. But he doesn't just do botany and plants. You can see how excited he gets when he's got a handful of green herbage in his hands. But he does geology, and he knows the history of the island. He knows just about everything there is to know about Cyprus, and he's an absolute delight to work with. Now, I'm sort of half hoping that by now there might be a bunch of delicious pumpkin pies in front of you. I must admit I was salivating a little bit at Simon's description of the food there, but to his haute cuisine, I give the humble bakery pastries. Absolutely wonderful. You can't really go wrong with those. But on the go slow trips in particular, we also aim to get into a taverna or two, and the food there is simple, honest food, but it is absolutely excellent. And Yanis tells me that the sort of default diet for people in Cyprus is basically vegan. There certainly is an enormous amount of incredibly good vegan, vegetarian food. It's all very delicious. So we pick up from the airport, we dash towards the hotel. It's a very short distance. The flight is early in the morning from Gatwick, so we've got a bit of an afternoon to spend doing some birding, and we find these laughing doves on the beach on our way. Now, when I first started doing these trips, laughing doves were a rarity. They were the sort of bird that you sought out, and if you saw them, you leapt up and down and did a high five. Now, laughing doves have expanded in the way doves do, really quite remarkably. And now you see them all over the place. You see them, they're very sagacious birds. You see them outside all of the bakeries eating the crumbs that people have left on the way. You get spur-winged plovers. No trip, no nature trek, no birding trip is really complete unless it has visited a sewage farm. And just next to the beach is a rather elegant little sewage farm with a whole variety of bits and pieces in it, but in particular some very, very smart looking spur-winged plovers. They really are beautiful birds. So from there, we zip to our hotel. This is a view from our hotel. It is in Old Paphos. And if you look to the back of the screen, you will see the lighthouse, which is there. And that marks the site of the archaeological site that I'll be talking about in a few minutes' time. It's a nice little hotel. It is family run. It is run by two brothers. With luck, you will see one of the brothers clutching his grandchildren there. It is incredibly friendly, and they do absolutely gorgeous breakfasts there. We eat elsewhere, as I'll mention in a second, but the breakfasts have got homemade jams and yogurts and fruits and things like this. And also the window overlooks all of that marvelous view, so you can do a little bit of birding. We often see peregrines whilst we're having our breakfast. I'll try and steal a seat overlooking the window. Then in the evening, we walk. It's about 10 minutes or so walk to the local taverna, and George there produces very, very classic, typical Cypriot food. There you can see my modest portion of something or other. I'm not quite sure exactly what I was eating then, and my equally modest portion of Kio beer. Yanis, sitting opposite me, has obviously noticed that somebody else has got a bit more food on their plate. In the morning, we go to the archaeological site just close to the hotel, as I mentioned, and this is an absolutely fantastic place. There are a couple of sites: the Tomb of the Kings, which aren't really kings; it's the Tomb of the Aristocrats, to be accurate, but also the Paphos Archaeological Park, which has got these amazing mosaics. These are 1,800 years old. They are absolutely incredible, and you can spend as long as you like looking at these, or you can join the rest of us and wander outside into this fantastic Greek style habitat with asphodels and things. And of course, there's an awful lot to see here. It's a very, very well-known site, I know. But I like to spend my time when I'm there just moving around the small bushes, because you know how exciting it is when you're on the hunt for migrants. So we're in March, either early, mid, late March, and you never know what's going to turn up. I mean, almost quite literally, you never know what's going to turn up. So 1 minute a bush will be empty, the next minute there'll be a Rupel's warbler looking at you with that magnificent white eye stripe. 1 minute there's nothing there at all, and then there's a bunting or a pair of buntings or 3 or 4 buntings that have suddenly popped out of seemingly nowhere in order to say hello. The place can be absolutely hooching with pipits and with wagtails. There's an awful lot of meadow pipits to sift through, but nearly always we find one of these very, very handsome red-throated pipits, absolutely glorious to see. And sometimes they can almost be abundant. Equally, probably more abundant, the number of wagtails that appear in all sorts of, not shapes, but all sorts of colours of head, black-headed and grey-headed and blue-headed, you name it. They are like little jewels flitting around in this area of the archaeological site. Loads of plants as well that Yanis, who has written the book, literally written the book on the plants of Cyprus, hunts around for, that we all hunt around for, but in the park in particular, so many parts of Cyprus, you get these wonderful cyclamens that are growing up the cracks or on the edges. They're just fantastic things to see. We go the next day is our longest drive. It's only an hour's drive, so it's not too long. And we go to the Akrotiri Peninsula. En route, Yanis entertains us with his encyclopedic knowledge of everything Cypriot, in particular the geology, which is a really fascinating geology. People visit Cyprus just for the geology. So we hear about that, and we hear about some of the history before we get there. And then we have a hunt around this magnificent place. So there was an area which I said, well, sometimes we don't see very much here, but we'll give it a go. And we walked up there and we found kingfisher and Chetty's warbler, spotted crake, blue throat, marsh harrier, and in the background there were various other warblers tweeting away. What do I know about what's going to be good and what's going to be bad? But this site sometimes can absolutely come up trumps. Elsewhere, as we drive around the peninsula, we see these wonderful flamingos. They're fairly common there. We can get quite close to them. We can even do some reasonable photography. That was one of my shots. You can tell that because it's slightly out of kilter. I've been very fortunate in a number of people from the last few trips who have lent me their slides. If the slide is good and crisp and sharp and well composed, then it's been from Michael Piercy or John Hale or Jim Sutherland or Philip Hamner or Tim or Marigold or somebody. This is a glossy ibis that we see striding around in the marsh. Again, you're never quite sure what might be in this marvelous, magnificent habitat. We see just little egrets and cattle egrets and the herons too. And this purple heron, we quite often get extremely good views. And this one was remarkably tame and sat in the reed bed and enabled people to get reasonably close, seemingly unconcerned. We see bitterns too, and here is a bittern doing a sort of an impression of E.T. in a way, flying high away from the marsh. We've had some fantastic views of them. Wherever we go, there's small pools which can have anything. This one time we drove and stopped, and there were 20 gull-billed terns dipping and diving and catching insects. We went back a little while ago, they'd gone, but other things had arrived. It is one of these sites where you never really know what's going to happen. A huge fall of yellow wagtails, a massive number of waders. And there are plants there too. We stopped for lunch and Yanis went off looking for orchids and came back very excitedly. He'd found this a group, I'm not quite sure what the collective noun for orchids is, a multitude perhaps, there certainly were a multitude of Ophrys cotchi, which is an endemic, and they were extremely impressive. I mean, they really were. They were big, there were lots of them, they were in very good nick. When we got back to the bus, we had to sort of lie Yanis down. He was so excited, but they were fantastic to see. So now we've moved away, or are moving away from Paphos. We're heading very, very, very gently north. We're going to go to our next hotel. And en route, of course, we stop off at various different places. There's a site near a dam where we have been lucky with this, the Cyprus warbler. Not always lucky, but the last time I was there, we had some good, if brief, views. They're difficult birds to see, but they can pop up in various different places. We head to a place called the Episcopi Centre, which is really interesting and has got lots of exhibits as well as good gardens and interesting things for birds, and it's high up and it sits near a massive limestone rock, a reef limestone, African reef limestone, which is in itself a very interesting geological formation. And on that, there normally is a peregrine. We hope there's a peregrine. We always look for the peregrine. We normally find the peregrine, and it's the Mediterranean race, so it looks that little bit darker. Also around and about the place, a genuine endemic, Cyprus scops owl. We've been pretty fortunate in being able to find that. As all of us know who've been hunting owls, they can be tricky when they are roosting, but sometimes we get the information and we're able to find the owls. We go after that to a little valley for a very special bird, Finch's wheatear. I'm sure a number of you have heard of it. It's a wheatear that winters in Cyprus. It's very, very difficult to get to the place where it goes for the spring and summer, so it's an excellent opportunity to see it. It's best, to be honest, during the Christmas trip because it's there for the winter, but we've quite often seen it in the beginning, in the go slow trip, which is the earlier of the two trips in March, when it's lurking around. It depends a little bit on what the weather is like. If the winter has been cool, the bird will hang around a bit longer, and hopefully we can catch up with them. They are interestingly cautious. They very rarely let you get more than about 200 meters away. Other than that, they're fine. But if the Finch's wheatears have gone, then the chances are that the Cyprus wheatear will be around, and we normally catch up with these with their really remarkable and very curious buzzy song quite often. And we drop into a little wetland area where we've been lucky with all sorts of things: red-rumped swallows, great spotted cuckoos, and this citrine wagtail. And we go, finally, before we hit our hotel, we go to a little woodland pear forest where we can find various orchids, and we have found this chameleon. The next day, dawn's bright and sunny, nearly always does, and we are now in our new hotel. And our hotel is in a most magnificent setting overlooking the Mediterranean. It is absolutely gorgeous. Lovely buffet meals and lovely buffet breakfast as well. And what we tend to do, because it's in a rural area, is we have an early morning potter about for those who would like to have an early morning potter about. And we find various orchids, we find various field gladioli, and we regularly hear and generally manage to see the black francolin. It's got a very distinctive call, as I'm sure you know, and you can hear it. We can hear it while we're having breakfast, and we can go out and look for it. And it's like one of these very strange birds you get, and like water rails can be like this, and corncrakes too. Very, very secretive, can't see them, and then all of a sudden they get a rush of showing off disease, and they hop onto the top of a rock or something like this, and that's what we hope that they do. So once we have had our breakfast, a lovely buffet breakfast with these homemade marmalades and yogurts and various other things like this, we head off. It doesn't take us very long before we get hungry again. And we stop at this nice picnic site, which is by an old Turkish village, very interesting and very good for a whole range of different small birds, little migrants and rock thrushes and you name it. And we end up going to a nice coastal area, Agios Gorgios. And here again, we've got a coastal area with scrub. So of course, we're looking around again for anything that might pop up, like this Rupel's warbler or Isabelline wheatears. You really just don't know what might happen. A couple of years ago, there was a huge migration of painted ladies. It was like walking through a river of painted ladies. And we turn over a few stones and find these wonderful beasts like this centipede, or also this tiny and amazingly elegant look. And then it's back to the hotel in order to get ourselves fortified for doing the list, and some need more fortification than others. And then it's off again the next morning, and we're going up into a gorge to begin with, where we're looking for really exciting birds. We're looking for these birds. I hope it's up on your screen, the long-legged buzzard, and we quite often see them displaying. And the excitement in the group is palpable, although some even have to lie down to recover themselves after the excitement of the long-legged buzzard, and who knows what else we might find around there. We carry on upwards to about 1,000 meters. We go to Stavros, and here there's a really nice little place to have a picnic, and there's also a cafe. It's an excellent place. The cafe sells coffee, as you'd imagine, classic Turkish Cypriot sort of coffee. It helps having a moustache, really, so you can filter out some of the grains, but it is very stimulating indeed, and it's a lovely place to be with various small birds like coal tits and others around and about calling. And of course, the coal tits up there are special. We go a little bit higher up to look at this endemic native cedar with its wonderful, beautiful spreading branches. We hunt for these birds, which are subspecies, so worth seeing. They're not full species yet, but who knows? We let the taxonomists get on with it, and we keep the jay and we keep the coal tit in our rear pocket, so that when they do become full species, we can smile knowingly. And then our last day on the Go Slow, or penultimate day before we go to the airport, we have a wonderful walk along the cliffs at Aphrodite Cliffs, and then we head to Smies, which, in order to annoy Yanis, I occasionally call it Smidges. So as we walk along that cliff top, the views are stupendous. There's normally warm, early spring sunshine. The plants are lovely. These turban buttercups, also scattered amongst the turban buttercups, are these gorgeous cyclamen. They really are just outstanding. There are butterflies around, of course, and Paphos blue we find just about every time we visit there. And then we go to Smies and we walk along what I call the Orchid Mile. And it's not really, it's about 1 kilometer, and Doros and the faithful bus follow us downhill. We drive up to the top. It's not a steep walk at all, around about 1 kilometer, and we walk down it, and there are orchids galore. And the way that the whole area is set up, these orchids are basically at about eye level, so they're fantastic to see and to photograph. Ophrys israelitica, there's Ophrys elegans, there's Dactylorhiza romana. It's just absolutely amazing. There's just about everything. There's about 20 22 species of orchids. It is a fantastic place to go to. I think I've pretty much run out of time, gone over time, but just to tell you about what would happen were you to come on the Isle of Cyprus trip rather than the Go Slow, that's what I was just talking about. There are an extra couple of stops that we do, or we jiggle the itinerary a little. So we have some time here in Larnaca. We fly to Larnaca. We do the Salt Lake, fantastic for all sorts of waders, and the marsh sandpipers that other people have mentioned and that they love, which are wonderful birds. And we also go up, if we can, up into the Troodos Mountains, and there we can also pick up those subspecies birds and tree creeper. We have had Dorothy's tree creeper, a lovely name for that subspecies, and we can frolic in the snow while we're up there as well. But I've overstretched my time, so I will stop there. Thank you.
Perfect. Right, hello everyone. My name is Laura Broom. Andy briefly presented me. I'm talking to you from Lisbon, most specifically from Cascais, where I live. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about Portugal, and more specifically about 2 trips that I guide for Naturetrek. Just before we get into the talk, a little bit about me. I did work for Naturetrek for a brief time as an operations assistant, and then I moved back to Portugal to work for the Portuguese Society for Birds, which is the Portuguese BirdLife partner. So it's kind of a smaller RSP. All the pictures on my presentation are either mine, but not many actually, because I don't take that many photographs. Some are from lovely clients that were on these trips, and then some I've just taken off the internet and things like that, but they all have people's names, I think, on them. So let's get cracking. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the birding and stargazing in rural Alentejo. This trip happens in November, so I'm actually off in less than 15 days on this trip. And then it also happens in February and March. So 1 trip in November and 1 either in February and March. And I think next year we have an overflow departure already set up. Just a quick map of where we go. So people fly into Lisbon. So that's where I usually pick the group up. And we cross the bridge and we go into the Tagus estuary. So we stay 2 nights here at a lovely lodge, which I'll show you a picture of in the next slide. We stay 2 nights here where we explore the Tagus Estuary Nature Reserve. So it's one of the biggest estuaries in Europe. Very important for bird migration. 2 nights here, and then we are off to the other side of Portugal. Literally, Spain is over on the white side of this slide. We go to Terina, where we stay at another lovely lodge, which I'll show you a picture of later. And we stay there for about 4 nights. The stargazing part of the trip is usually only in Terina, where we work with the Alquiva Dark Sky Reserve. You see further down here, they have a really nice spot there that we visit for a couple of nights where we do some stargazing. Usually on the first night, they actually take up their scopes up to the lodge. So we do a stargazing session from the lodge, which is lovely. And we also go there during the day for a sun viewing session. And other than the stargazing, during the day, we are out and about looking at birds. We won't do many early rises because we will be up for a little bit later on, a little bit later than the usual trips, usually the birding trips. So that's it for this little map. Here we go. So this is the Estuary Nature Reserve. So the first day, I usually aim to take you straight out in the field. We have a picnic lunch that I usually take with me. And as you can see, there are lots and lots of birds here. Most of these pictures are very big flocks of glossy ibis. There's a really big population of glossy ibis, and they are increasing in numbers. So we will see lots of those. This church here is the Nossa Senhora de Alcamé, which is the patron of the people that work in these fields here. So I usually try and get there to have the picnic there. There's some steps we can sit on. Sometimes I don't get there because there are so many things to see on the way and I can't. So sometimes we have the picnic on the way, but I just lay that on the 9-seater minibuses that we use to travel. So these are the lovely lodges I was telling you about. These are wooden lodges set in a cork oak forest. They are really lovely. I really like to stay here. There's about 12 lodges, I think, in a circle, and each one of us or couple stays in a different lodge. They have a kitchen and everything, so you can do tea. You can sit outside in the balcony just listening to the birds. During the night, I've heard tawny owl. I think some people have heard barn owl as well, which is great. What we do, because this is not a hotel, what we do is we do go out for the meals. So the breakfast, either there's another house not very far where they serve us breakfast, or we do go out into the local cafes, which is great. So you can get a little taste of the local pastries. Portuguese are famous for pastries. This is one of the things I missed when I was living in the UK. And for the evening meals, we do go out to restaurants as well. And I organize all of that. I am a vegetarian myself, so I'm always worrying about people's dietary requirements, and it's usually okay, so don't worry about that. So these are the lodges that we stay at. So we stay here for a couple of nights. A few more pictures of the places that we visit. So in the morning, we'll go around and look at some salt pans, marshes and things like that. This is the picnic spread that I usually do for you. And we usually have picnics outside because it's always nice weather, fingers crossed. A picture of a nice black winged still. Flamingos, we will see them everywhere. A few more nice pictures of hoopoes. Oh, white storks, they will be everywhere. You will see so many white storks on this trip. And it's interesting because obviously the white storks used to migrate to Africa, but they now stay here during the winter. So we see them on all the trips, November, February, March, in huge numbers actually. And they eat the crayfish, the invasive crayfish, so it's good. Here the osprey as well, lots of waders and the salt pans. So it'll be really nice to try and identify them all. So after 2 days in the Tagus Estuary Nature Reserve, we will travel to Terina, as you saw on the map, on the other side of Portugal. Right in the middle, we will stop at Évora for lunch. Top Évora. And just before we get into the town, I will have a little stop in to show you a nice, interesting cultural side of Portugal. We will have a visit of the Almendres Cromlech. So these are megalithic structures. There are many of these spread across the Alentejo, and these are the most well-known. So it's a stone circle. It's nice because it's also set amongst cork oak. So there's also time for birding on the way there. Up here at the top is the Interpretation Center. It's not when it is, we can do a quick loo break. And there's also some nice shopping to be done there. Really nice books about Portugal and about the megalithic structures. Really nice olive oils and things like that. So we'll do that. After that, we'll go into Évora, as I said, where we will have some lunch at a local restaurant, maybe some tapas or things like that. And down here, we've got the Diana Roman Temple, which is a really nice place we can visit. And actually, it's not a really a big walk. I mean, the Évora is a really small town, and walk around it. It doesn't take that very long, and it's not very steep, so it's a nice little walk. And we always give you time to have some free time. So this is Trine. This is the lodge we stay at, Herdade Dom Pedro. So Dom Pedro. And I mean, I just feel at home there. It's a really nice place. It's at the top of a hill. Here on the right-hand side at the top, you see the view from the back. This is a nice sunset here. You can see view from the front of the house. Here on the right-hand side at the bottom is the living room, where we always do the checklist at the end of the day. And this fireplace is always on. So Freddie, the owner of the house, always has it on. It is a little bit cold here because it's in the interior of Portugal. It does get a little area. There are heaters, there are blankets, and this fireplace is always lit. Here at the middle, I have breakfast because it's a really nice breakfast at this event. Lots of fruits, lots of croissants, and lots of nice local cheese. Right, so this is another interesting thing that we do on this trip. This is a very different trip, I think, from the other ones. There's lots of culture, lots of stargazing, but also wine. So we do visit a winery on this trip. A few pictures from the winery. We usually have a guided walk around, and at the end, we do try the wine. These are the vineyards here at the bottom, at the left. And I always take my scope because, as you can see on the far back, there is a lake, and there are always some interesting birds to see there. So yeah, wine tasting. These are a few pictures of the towns that we visit. On the left-hand side, the two pictures are from Tirene. So our lodge is very close to a very small town called Tirene. We will visit, and you will be surprised that it is very empty. Not many people live there. It is the interior of Portugal. Most of the people have gone to the small cities like Lisbon. But it's empty, but it's a really nice, quaint village. Here at the top, right, I've got Ponte da Ajuda, so Ajuda's Bridge. This is another spot that I like to take people to, either for picnic or at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, I've had really nice views. We have really nice views of common cranes just flying over. On the other side is Spain. So this is a really old Roman bridge. They used to cross the river. The new bridge is just on the right-hand side. It's not on the picture. And here's a market, is Estremoz market. We can't always visit it because it's on a Saturday only, and I think it's the first Saturday of the month, if I'm not mistaken. But when we can, I do try and take the group there because it's nice to just to get to know the local culture, buy some local food for the picnics as well, and just buy some souvenirs. Wow. So what about the birds? Little bustards. I always am very happy to see them because they are declining in Portugal rapidly, unfortunately. So it's really nice to get a good view of them. So little bustards here. At the bottom, we've got the Iberian grey shrike, common crane. The common crane, if you come on the March trip, unfortunately, we probably won't see it because they have left. So the common cranes arrive usually around mid-November and leave around mid-February. So in March, might not see it. At the bottom here, cataligrades. Griffon vultures, great bustards, red-legged partridge. The great bustards are amazing to see, these huge birds. I usually go up to Campo Maior, so north of the lodge, and we usually have a good view of them. Once we saw them amongst the little bustards, which was an amazing view. Stargazing. So as I said, we do a couple of sessions at the observatory. This is on the left-hand side here at the top. This is the observatory. They've got the big scopes up there. And at the bottom here and on the right, this was during the day and we were doing the sun viewing session. Here is Nuno on the right-hand side. He's usually the guy that guides us through the stars. He's a local. A few of the pictures from the astronomy bit. I won't go into much detail because I'm the birder and the wildlife guide. I'm not the astronomy guide, but I've got some nice pictures for the people that are into the astronomy bit. Flowers, yes, we can see a few of the flowers. Usually March is the best trip, and even the February trip. We sometimes see a few of these flowers. This one here, the autumn crocus, we see it in November, of course, as well. It's not just birds, is it? We've got the frogs, the salamanders, the butterflies. So we're always looking into all of that. They're usually around. The fire salamander, actually, we took this picture. We went out once for dinner from the lodge, the wooden lodge, the first one we stay at. We saw that one there. I think it had rained a little bit during the evening, and so they were all out. It was lovely. Right, now I want to tell you a little bit about the spring in southern Portugal trip. This one is in April, so it's a little bit different. We've got the migrants, we've got lots of different species from the first trip that I was telling you about. A little map. On this one, you fly into Faro, not Lisbon. So I will pick you up here in Faro, in the Algarve. And what we will do is we will drive east and then up north to Mertula, and that's where we stay for 3 nights in Mertula. From Mertula, we will explore a little bit further north. We will go into Castro Verde, Urique, so we will explore this area around here. And then after that, for the next 4 nights, we will go down to Sagres. So on the left-hand side here, Sagres, we will stay at a hotel overlooking the sea, and we will explore Sagres, we'll explore Lagos, and we will go up to Algesur as well and explore that area there. So that's it for the map. This is Mertula. Mertula is just this amazing hilltop village. You can see the castle here at the top. On the right-hand side here, you've got the hotel that we stay at. The hotel is called Beira Rio, which means by the river. As you can see, we are by the river. And from here, you can already do lots of bird watching just from your balcony. Here on the left-hand side are the lesser kestrels. So they breed in the village, and we will have many, many chances to see them very, very close by, which is really nice. We will visit a couple of spots. As I said, we will go to Pulo do Lobo. Pulo do Lobo means the wolf's leap. And it's just this place where the river kind of gets pinched. We'll see lots of different birds like griffon vulture, blue rock thrushes. We might see cinereous vulture, rock bunting, bee-eaters, woodcut shrikes, and cinereous vulture I said already, golden eagle, and it's just a lovely spot. We will spend a morning here. We will have our picnic. Somewhere there are some picnic tables up there, and we will just enjoy this place for a little while. Around Mertula, it's interesting because we can see a lot of the key birds on this trip, like the black-bellied sandgrouse, calandra lark, and even we will visit some of the smaller like lagoons or dams, and we will see things like the great-crested grebe, the common snipe. So there's lots to see, not very far from the hotel, and if people want, we can always come back to the hotel, drop them off, and maybe if people want to have a look around the town instead, even I will take people around the town in the morning. So it's a very relaxed time here in Mertula. As I said, from Mertula, we will visit Castro Verde, and Castro Verde is just the mecca for bird watching in Portugal. So when people think about birding in Portugal, most people think Algarve, but I think Castro Verde is also becoming a place where many people come to. And what can we see in Castro Verde? Little bustards. We will try again to look for the little bustard. Red-legged partridge, great bustard. Obviously the white storks, they will be everywhere. Little owls, short-toed snake eagles, Montagu's harriers, Spanish imperial eagle, alpine swift, black-winged kites, European roller. So it'll just be an amazing time full of birds and all sorts of different species. What we will do is on the day where we go down to Sagres, we will have a stop midpoint in Lagoa dos Salgados. And Lagoa dos Salgados is, as you can see, it's a lagoon. And on this side, you still have the sea. So we can also have a little look at the sea. It's actually threatened by a big hotel that they want to build. There is a... we do want to try and make it a natural reserve, but anyway, it's all up in the air at the moment. So it's a really nice place to see glossy ibis, purple and gray heron, purple swamp hen, all sorts of waders, all sorts of ducks. So it's just a really nice walk. There are a few hides we can look, and there is a nice walk we can do around. So when we get to Sagres, this is our hotel. So on the left-hand side, this is our hotel. This is the view from the sea. And on the right-hand side here at the bottom is the view from the hotel out to the sea. So you see it's got a little pool you can use if the weather is good. And these are just some pictures from Sagres. It's a completely different scenery from where we were in Mertula. We can look out at the sea. You will be able to see things from your balcony. What we do is on the first day after we arrive from Sagres, we will go a little bit north and we will visit this mountain range called Espinhaço de Cão. It's got a really funny name. Anyway, so it's an interesting sort of habitat because we will have the cork forest. We'll have lots of sister species, and we will be looking at common nightingale, Iberian chiffchaff, crested tit, and things like that. And after we visit Espinhaço do Cão, we will move to Algesur, and that's again by the beach. This is Praia da Amoreira in Algesur. We will explore the plants at the dunes. We will have good views of birds as well out at the sea. I've got a picture here of the Sandwich Tern, which is a possibility there. There's also some lagoons. It's not on the picture here, but on the right-hand side, there are a few lagoons inland that we can have a good look at. And on one of the days we visit Alvor. So this is a really, really important estuary in the Algarve. So we will be parking here on the right-hand side of the picture. There's a little car park here. On the left-hand side of the picture, sorry, there's a little car park here. So we'll park here and we have a little walk looking into the lagoons. And even on the drive, we can look at the Solpan there, and we will have a look out at the sea as well. We might see odd-winged gull. There will be flamingos everywhere, spoonbills, even butterflies. There's a picture of a monarch butterfly here that people saw on the trip. And we will visit Boca do Rio in Sagres. So that's a little bit closer to the hotel. And there's a nice picture here of a Savi's warbler, I haven't put the sound here, but I don't know if people from England know, but you should listen to the sound. It's a really cool bird. And this is the final day, I'm afraid, of the trip. On the final day, we will not drive very far from the hotel, and we will explore the Sagres fortress. So we can actually go into this fortress and have a good walk around here. There will be red-billed chops flying around, peregrine falcons, gannets up at the sea. We will have European stags, red-rumped swallows, and I also put a little picture of this nice orchid that they saw on a trip last year, I think it was, because we will always be looking at the flowers and not just the birds. And that's it for my presentation. I will now, we are going into a break, aren't we? Exactly.
Yeah, thanks very much. I really enjoyed that talk. It's a great example, that tour, of a holiday where it's not just water or wildlife. And in fact, my parents have been on that tour, as you know, because you hosted them. My dad's a keen birder and my mum less so, but she loved the kind of astronomy, wine tasting, the historical inputs. And we often get questions from people along the lines of, my partner or spouse isn't such a keen birder. What can you recommend? And a tour like that is ideal, isn't it? Because there's so much of interest. It's not just the birds and wildlife. And we do like to experience the authentic side of these countries. Portugal's got so much to offer. So I really enjoyed that. Thanks. So we're going to go into a break now until 8:25. So 6 minutes, folks, to head off to the loo, get yourself a top up. And then after that, I think that Andy might still be having problems. So we're likely to go into Simon's talk on the Pyrenees straight after the break. Andy's still working. We did rehearse things. You might think we didn't rehearse things. We did. Everything was working perfectly at 7 o'clock. So I don't know what's happened there. But I'm going to just put up an interval slide to tide us over for a few minutes. If this works, then we should have some Portuguese guitar music, I hope. And we'll be back at 8:25. lovely guitar music there. I hope it gets a thumbs up from you, Lara, as authentic music. We will try to bring Andy's talk on Cyprus to you, but I'm not sure whether we're quite there yet. So we're going to go over to you, Simon, on the French Pyrenees. One of my favourite European tours is a smashing hotel up there in the Pyrenees, which I've led as well. You've been over there more recently than me, and I'm looking forward to some memories. So over to you, Simon. Thanks.
Okay. I hope this is showing and I'm sounding all right. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit croaky, but I'll try and make my way through it to the best of my abilities. So very nice to be talking to so many of you. I know I am really. It's weird sitting at one's own table and not being able to get any feedback. I'm a former teacher, so I always tend to sort of riff off the crowd a little bit, but this time I'll just believe you're all there and try and entertain the troops. So I'm going to talk to you about the French Pyrenees, which is a wonderful destination that Naturetrek runs several tours to during the spring and summer, and I think there's even one in the autumn as well for the autumn bulbs, which can be very wonderful. But I'm going to put a particular focus on the wildlife festival, which we have running during mid-June every year. Now, I did this tour back in 2022, and it's a really, really special trip. And this is perhaps the epitome of a Naturetrek tour that's got something for everybody, whatever their particular interest is within wildlife. So, where are the Pyrenees? I expect you all know. We fly from London to Lourdes in the southwest of France, a flight of only about an hour and a half, something like that, landing in Lourdes and then taking the really very short drive, just about an hour, hour and a half, up into the foothills and then the high peaks of the Pyrenees, where we stay in the beautiful little village of Gèdre at just over 1,000 meters, right up in the Pyrenees, quite close to the Spanish border. So in that satellite view there, we are looking south. So anything beyond that yellow line is Spain, but we stay within France. By and large on this trip, we may take the odd step across the border, but we're on a French Pyrenees. So we're on the cooler, more humid northern flank of the Pyrenees. And this is where we stay, the lovely Hotel Brèche de Rolland, which is run by our old friends Philippe and Odile, who've been running this place for a very, very long time indeed. And if I've got my facts straight, this is, I believe, the hotel run even way back then by Philippe and Odile, where Naturetrek ran its very first European tour back in 1980 something, back in the mists of time. So this was this is a really important place in Naturetrek history. And on the June Wildlife Festival, we take over the entire hotel. So the whole place is filled with mad keen naturalists and people who enjoy the high mountains and walkers and just generally good people to spend lots of time with and to enjoy the lovely mountain atmosphere. It's an absolutely stunning little hotel. Philippe and Odile, they run it just absolutely beautifully. As you'll see, I hope, the food is exquisite. The rooms are beautiful. It's lovely and quiet, and it's just the most lovely place to stay. It's set spectacularly in the village of Gèdre, high up in the Pyrenees, and it's just the most perfect spot. It's called the Hotel Brèche de Rolland because you have lovely views to the south into the very highest peaks of the Pyrenees, and that ridge there is the border with Spain. And I think you might be able to see up here, there's a kind of bite or cut into the curtain wall at the back of the Cirque de Gavarnie, more of which a little bit later on, which is called the Brèche de Rolland, which is where the French mythological hero, a kind of French King Arthur type, is supposed to have smote the mountainside with his sword and chopped this big breach in the mountains up high there, the Brèche de Rolland. And there's a little bit of a close-up of it. We won't be getting that close to it because there is no proper mountain climbing involved in this trip, I promise, and more about that later. Mountain trips can sometimes be a little bit intimidating because some people think, oh, crikey, I'll be scrambling up these slopes. And going up precipices and then back down really tight little footpaths and so on. Well, actually, no, you won't. We've got it all sorted out. All the sites that we go to are highly accessible by vehicle, and then gentle walks with no more than small undulations. Although in the Wildlife Festival, one of the beauties of this is that we can have slight variations. So small numbers of people can go off and perhaps do a slightly more challenging walk. Other people might focus on butterflies and orchids one day. Another group might be looking for birds the next day, and then swap news and then go to other places during the course of the week. So it's very flexible, something for everyone, but it's a very accessible part of the world. And the beauty of Gedra is its location. Here it is at just over 1,000 meters, but it's within easy reach by 9-seater minibus of numerous sites up to, and in fact, in some cases, well above 2,000 meters. So this place that I'll take you to later on, which is called the Cirque de Trémousse, one of the largest of these huge bowl-shaped glacial troughs up high in the mountains here, where we have our picnic up here, is at nearly 2,200 meters. But as I say, you won't notice it because we'll drive you up there, we'll get you to this lovely area, and once you're there, as you can see, it's pretty flat, and we just wander around gently and have a nice walk in the alpine meadows. It's just stunning. And so, as you can see, almost everywhere you go from Gedra, there's a wonderful Pyrenean valley to explore. Many of them well populated by both sheep and goats, and also cattle. And this is one of the last areas in Europe where traditional transhumance is practiced. Transhumance is where the animals are taken up into the high pastures for the summer, and then they are walked back down the mountains in the autumn time, where they'll be fed on hay and kept at lower altitude. And when we're there during June, this is the time when the animals are being taken up to those high meadows, because the grass has grown, the hay is lush, and there's lots to be eaten for a delicious, I won't say a delicious cow, that comes across all wrong, but it is, I suppose, functionally true. But we will encounter these sorts of great herds of cattle making their way up into the high pastures. These great U-shaped glacial troughs, these valleys with small streams flowing down through them, are the bread and butter of our trips, and we'll be exploring several of these on successive days. Some of them quite stark and rocky, others of them more lush, and we do find some areas with really quite remarkably well-developed flora and their associated fauna as well. What sorts of birds might you expect to see? Well, these are mountains, so you'd expect to see birds of prey. And indeed, of course, we do. One of the ones we see a little bit more frequently is the short-toed snake eagle, which does, as the name suggests, feed on lizards and especially snakes, even in these high mountains. We also see vultures on a daily basis. The commoner, or the commonest of the three vultures which is present, is the griffon vulture. And if we're very lucky, we may encounter a group of them down on a carcass, perhaps an unfortunate sheep or a Pyrenean chamois, for example. And if they're there and they're feeding, they can be quite tolerant of a close approach. This is a group we found on the way down, walking off one of the hills a couple of years ago. There are also Egyptian vultures, which breed in small numbers in the French Pyrenees, and we have a good chance of encountering some of those. But the vulture that everyone wants to see in the Pyrenees is this one, the lammergeier, or sometimes known as the bearded vulture, which is Europe's rarest vulture. But luckily in the Pyrenees, it remains, I'll say, not uncommon. It's never an abundant species, but we would expect to see lammergeiers on most days, and we do know exactly where there's a regular and traditional nest site in one of the valleys, which we should be able to show you, and with luck, show you the growing chick sitting on the edge of the nest, waiting for its parents to bring it some delicious cracked up bones. As I've mentioned before, in some areas, not all, but in some areas, there is very, very well developed hay meadow habitat, and there's some absolutely stunning areas of this sort of habitat which support huge numbers by British standards, absurdly huge numbers of butterflies. And there are occasions where you're just overwhelmed and you just don't know which way to look. Many of these species are either very, very rare or infrequent, or in fact unknown in Britain. So we'll see lots and lots of this. One of the commonest species to be seen, in fact, the black-veined white butterfly, but also lots and lots of fritillaries. Pearl-bordered fritillary, which is a pretty scarce species in Britain, and heath fritillary, which is a very rare species in Britain, are both just absurdly common, and you have them along roadsides and flitting around your feet up in these high mountains. And there are 8 or 10 other fritillary species we can expect to see, including Queen of Spain and spotted fritillaries as well. The brown family tends to be a little bit undersold as a group of butterflies to look at, but there are some stunning examples of this family up there in the Pyrenees as well. The pearly heath, a nice variation, quite similar to our small heath butterfly, but with this lovely white flash on the under hind wing, and the large wall brown, which is a variation on the perhaps familiar wall brown, but a big butterfly with these lovely big eye spots. Also in the brown family, there are lots and lots of species of ringlet, and many of them are extremely tricky to identify. If you're really into your butterflies, Naturetrek also offers a specialist butterfly trip a little bit later in the year, when we tend to capture a slightly wider variety of butterflies, and the focus is very much more on those butterflies. But of course, we do also take in all the other wildlife as well. And it's possible a little bit later in the season to see over 70 species in a single week. In the Wildlife Festival week, well north of 50 species of butterflies entirely likely. A little bit weather dependent, but generally speaking, we have lots of sunny, warm weather, and the butterflies fly and show us their stuff. There are quite subtle species of butterfly to see as well, like the skippers, dingy, quite common in Britain, but also the lovely marbled skipper, and then various different variations on the grizzled skipper. There are 5 or 6 species of grizzled skipper to look for. This is the Obertours grizzled skipper, which if you didn't look extremely closely, you'd have difficulty distinguishing from the British species. There are coppers to see as well. The purple edged copper and the sooty copper are particularly beautiful examples of those. And then, of course, there are the blues, and there are just blues everywhere of about 15, 20 different species, large blues, small blues, but also species we don't get in Britain like this, the Mazarine blue, long-tailed blue as well, various different gorgeous species to have a look at, and all just abundant around your feet wherever you look. No effort at all to find many kinds of wonderful butterflies. If you're very lucky, in a few special spots, you might get the chance to see some really quite specialist species like the lesser purple emperor. And 2 that we really look for in the high mountains are the Apollos. This one, the false Apollo, which may look horrifically worn, and that individual is a bit worn, it's true, but these sort of blank sections at the ends of the wings where they don't have scales, that is normal for the species, in fact. But the one that we really want to see, and we will succeed in finding, is the glorious Apollo, the true Apollo, a lovely high altitude butterfly, really big, the size of a swallowtail, with these glorious red dots on the hindwing. And we should get good views of that species too. There's other insects to see as well, things like the sulfur owlfly, which glides around like a wingsuit pilot. An absolutely amazing insect. When I first saw that, I was just blown away by it, better than any butterfly I saw on the trip, I think it was. There's Italian shield bugs, the so-called AC Milan shield bug, named after the red and black football kit of said football team. A few dragonflies, not all that many, because it's quite cool and quite high altitude. There's a few to have a look at, and we should get a good view of quite a few species of those, including 4-spotted chasers. There are some Orthoptera will certainly hear a lot of bush crickets and indeed field crickets. And if we're lucky, we should get to grips with a few species, including the rather sought after wartbiter bush cricket, which is a very rare species indeed in Britain, but rather more common on the continent. So we'll be exploring these valleys at high altitude, but also at lower altitude. It's important not to just go for the high alpine specialities. And at lower altitude, we often find a beautiful selection of plants, including orchids, which are a big attraction for many people, various species of orchids to enjoy, including the lovely burnt orchid, which in Britain rarely grows more than about 3 inches tall, but grows up to a foot tall in the foothills of the Pyrenees. This one, the early spider orchid, an extremely rare, extremely range-restricted species in Britain, but delightfully abundant in the Pyrenees. Greater butterfly orchid, also abundant in all these gorgeous flower-filled meadows and hedgerows. Pyramidal orchids, familiar from Britain, but vanilla orchid, completely unknown from Britain. There are many other alpine specials to see, including the gentians, spring and trumpet gentians, which are a big hit with many visitors. And then when we're up in these high lakeside environments, this is the beauty of it. Once we get you there, the fact that there's a lake and there's a path around it shows you that it's flat. And we can walk around at high altitude, taking in the beautiful scenery and the really beautifully varied wildlife. One thing we will look very hard for is this, a very special species, the Pyrenean brook salamander, which is endemic to the Pyrenees, only found in that one place. And where we see that is this beautiful place I mentioned earlier, the Cirque de Trémousse, at over 2,200 meters in these very, very cold springs. Now, how do we get you up there? Well, we drive you as far as we can, but then we put you on this wonderful contraption, a little land train towed by an impressively large tractor, which gets you up the last 400 or 500 meters of ascent as you sit there in comfort. And at the top there, your Naturetrek leaders, as usual, for those of you who've been on a Naturetrek tour before, will make you, I hope, a delicious picnic lunch while you sit and enjoy the plants, the butterflies, the flowers, and then spread out with your lunch and relax in the sunshine, taking in the views. At one point, we will certainly take you on this walk, which goes up way, way up high to almost as high at 2,100 meters and the border with Spain. And up there, we have a good chance of seeing a few mammals, alpine marmots, which are now thankfully abundant again in the Pyrenees, having gone extinct and having to be reintroduced mid-century. But also we hope to see Pyrenean chamois, a rather endangered species of chamois, different from the alpine variety. Up there at high altitudes, we'll be looking for the rock thrush. And if we're very, very fortunate indeed, and we check round snow patches, we might find the very desirable white-winged snowfinch, but that will only be found at the very highest altitudes, where almost, well, I won't say almost anything's possible, but there are even 1 or 2 other alpine specialities like the alpine accenter, and even wall creeper has been seen on previous trips up here. The highlight for many will be a visit to the Cirque de Gavarnie, which is only about 10 kilometers from Gedra, and we take a full day walk deep into the heart of this enormous glacial landscape, a vast glacial bowl with enormous titanic waterfall cascades falling down, including Europe's largest free-falling or highest free-falling waterfall right down into the floor of the Cirque. And we enjoy our picnic up there in the company of alpine choughs and lammergeiers and ravens, and also some glorious endemic plants like the Raymonda, distantly related to the African violets, and a very, very rare species only found in the Pyrenees. And for those of you who are botanically minded, there are several endemic species up here to enjoy. Things like the Pyrenean saxifrage, an absolutely stunning 2 or 3 foot long flower spike that only flowers once and then the plant dies. The long-leaved butterwort, found on a very few north-facing, cool, wet rock walls. Pyrenean fritillaries, only found in this mountain range and nowhere else on Earth. And also Pyrenean rampions and thistles and a whole plethora of other endemic, beautiful plants up here. Other alpines include St. Bernard's lily and the fringed pink, among many other representatives within their families, such as the Turk's turban lily and that lovely columbine or aquilegia on the right-hand side there. Many of these species, if they're found at all in Britain, are scarce. In the Pyrenees, they are super abundant. Fairy foxglove growing on some of the specific rocks on some roadside spots is a particular favorite. And there are just numerous saxifrages and gentians and stone crops and any number of botanical wonders to be seen. Just coming to the end now, we will also be on the lookout for some reptiles, just to make sure all the different animal and plant groups are covered. Wall lizards are not uncommon. There are snakes, not a great many, but we do have a couple of regular spots where we can go and look for smooth snake, which is, again, a very rare species in Britain, but much more frequent in the south of France. So when you've had a full day of that, enjoying gentle rambles and delicious picnic lunches and gentle drives, none of the drives taking more than 45 minutes to an hour, absolute maximum, and many of them shorter from the hotel. At the end of all that, you'll probably be ready to come back to the hotel and enjoy a delicious meal in the relaxed, intimate dining room, where the food is, I'll be honest with you, it is the best food I've ever had on any Naturetrek trip that I've ever led, and I've done very many of them, and the food here at the hotel in Gedra is absolutely outstanding. Whether you're a vegetarian, a meat eater, a vegan, all of these are covered. The food is simply superb, both the main courses and the delicious desserts, which are just have to be tasted to be believed. You've got an absolute treat in store, along with an extremely extensive and I'm assured reliable and well-stocked wine list. So what more could you ask for a 7-day trip to Europe and the Pyrenees? So I'll leave you with that one last view of one of these high altitude lakes that we'll visit, and encourage all of you to put this on your maybe list for 2024, the Wildlife Festival in June to the High Pyrenees. And I hope you've enjoyed having a look at a few photos. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yeah, that brings back lots of good memories for me of that wonderful part of France. And if you fancy joining us, 7th to the 14th of June 2024, and we've taken over the whole hotel. There'll be about 5 or 6 Naturetrek leaders on that one. There'll be at least one dedicated botanist, a couple of birders, an entomologist, and we're just going to have a great time up there, enjoying Philippe and Odil's hospitality. Cracking. Thank you very much, Simon. Us 5 have cleared our evenings up until 9:30. We're very happy to chat through any questions that you may have. I'm just going to go through one or two of the comments that have come up on the Q&A during the evening, and feel free to type away in the chat or the Q&A section if you have a question for one of the speakers. Neil, I'd like to start with you. Are you there still? Just let me make sure you're going to come off mute. Are you still with us, Neil? I will.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, there we are. So a couple of questions on Iceland. So we start off the evening with Iceland, and I mean, one of the reasons we don't go to the Faroes and patronize their tourism industry is their terrible history with hunting of whales. And of course, it still goes on in Iceland as well, but to a lesser extent. And a couple of people, Alison Partner particularly, has asked what the current situation there is. And is there anything we can do as ecotourists or an ecotourism company to put pressure on the whaling situation in Iceland, do you think?
I think there is. I mean, I did answer the question as much as I think that sometimes you can walk away from these countries that carry on these acts which we don't like, or you can go there and try and sort of bang the drum as well. And I think our presence by going on whale watching trips is a valuable lesson learned. And you only have to go to Husavik to see the sheer number of whale watching boats there are in the harbour there. And there's something like about half a dozen at least, of which 3 or 4 will be going out twice or even 3 times a day. So the ecotourism is very, very strong there. And I feel myself that in actual fact, whaling can't last much longer there. The sad thing is that they are hunting fin whales, which is obviously one of the biggest animals in the world. And there has been periods when the whaling has stopped, and then it has recently reconvened again. My understanding is that there is only actually one company doing it now. He's quite an influential businessman, but I feel that, yeah, Faroes is a different story, really. But I think with Iceland, we've just got to keep on going there, and I think eventually we will win as environmentalists.
Yeah, that's great, Neil. Thanks. But I've got a couple of questions for you on Portugal. There are a couple of specific questions on the wildfires that have wreaked havoc in Mediterranean Europe this year. So one, how is Portugal faring with climate change and wildfires in the summer? And I also just want to ask you quickly, just more broadly, Mediterranean, Portugal and Spain are well known for mass tourism, more so in Spain than Portugal. But how important is careful, lightly treading ecotourism for Portugal's economy? How keen is the Portuguese authorities to generate and encourage rural tourism? And the final question, as a Portuguese, do you feel more of a sense of pride leading in Portugal than you do in other countries? Is it a special ingredient showing foreigners around your home country?
Yeah, Andy, regarding your last question, definitely. I really enjoy showing people around my country, and I think because I speak the local language, it's always easier to chat to the local people. The restaurants and the hotels, they're kind of more open and more nice to me and my group, I think. I don't know. But no, I really enjoy leading in Portugal because I can show you my local culture. I can tell you about different stories that have happened in my childhood or whatever. So it's really nice for me. Regarding the ecotourism, I think the local government is really into increasing ecotourism. I mean, even we at my work, we have a really good relationship with the tourism of Portugal, and especially with the branch that kind of overlooks even the bird watching tourism side of things. And I think they do understand the importance of groups like Naturetreks, in terms of us not having, we don't have a big impact on in terms of destroying habitat, whatever. We're there to look at the birds, and we're really interested in the habitats as they are. And I think that sends a really important message to the government that they shouldn't destroy the habitats. And I was telling you about Lagoa do Salgado, which is being threatened by a really big hotel. And so I think it's important to go there and show the people that we like to look at it. We like to look at the birds. We don't want to look at another hotel. And what was the other question? Sorry.
The wildfires in particular, the summer conditions.
The wildfires. Yes, I mean, as I said on my comment, wildfires are just a part of our summers here in Portugal. We already know that they're going to happen. I don't know if there is much to do to prevent them. There is, as I mentioned as well, there is a big paper industry in Portugal, and there are a lot of eucalyptus everywhere. For the people that have visited, I'm sure you have noticed that. And so there is a bit of a struggle between us and the organization I work for, in terms of we don't want any more eucalyptus to be planted, and the local government that obviously is looking at the money side of things. But there are a few movements coming up where people are starting to, when there is a fire, they start to plant native plants like strawberry trees and cork oaks and things like this. So yeah, it's just a part of our summers now, but things do come back to life after a while, and yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Laura. There's someone I want to ask you about the typical makeup of a party, because sometimes a question we get from someone contemplating the Naturetrek holiday for the first time are, these holidays are for experts, and am I going to feel like a fish out of water? Describe a typical makeup of a Naturetrek group and the way enthusiasm and expertise is shared around the party and the way newcomers are made to feel welcome.
Usually the people who come on the trips, and I say this not only on the more generalist trips, but sometimes specialist trips, and people arrive and they say, "Oh, I'm terribly nervous. I'm really not all that knowledgeable about birds." And in some cases, it turns out they actually are, and they know far, far more than they think they do, and that's nearly always the case to some extent. But the key thing is that for me at least, the most important thing about a successful Naturetrek trip is that it becomes a team effort. Yes, you've got a leader who has been to the site before and knows the sites and knows the birds or the plants or the butterflies, but it very, very quickly becomes a team effort, and people make sometimes very long-lasting friendships with other people by sharing what they know. I mean, the piece of advice I always give on the first day is, if you see something and you're not sure what it is and you want to know what it is, please say or ask. And, sometimes you'll make a mistake in an identification, but that doesn't matter. And I always make a point of, not always deliberately, I'll be honest, but making a mistake on the first outing on the trip. And I constantly make mistakes because I'm trying to find species to show to people. And I make a point of saying, look, you see, I've made a mistake. It doesn't matter. All I'm doing is sharing what I think I've seen, and we can all work on it together. So there is absolutely no pressure on a Naturetrek trip, unlike, I think it's fair to say, with some competitor companies, which have perhaps a rather different approach to trying to sort of get all the target species and so on. It's highly collaborative, it's extremely friendly, and everyone supports each other. I think it's also fair to say on most Naturetrek trips, a majority of people, it isn't their very first Naturetrek trip. So if it is your first time you've ever been on a Naturetrek trip, you will find lots of people who are very much immersed in that kind of culture of sharing and, just enjoying things together and finding out together. And sometimes none of us know. And your leaders will be reduced to looking through the books and searching for things on the internet and enjoying that process of learning as we go on together. And, it really isn't something to be intimidated by in any way whatsoever. If you feel that you're lacking in knowledge over the lizards of the Mediterranean, A, you're not alone, B, it doesn't matter, and C, you know an awful lot about lots of other things that your leaders and your colleagues on the trip don't know about. So share those things too.
Great.
Yeah, I would echo that 100%. It's about enjoying wildlife, and that's what the group likes to do. And like you, Simon, at the beginning of the trip, it's what I always emphasize. We're there to enjoy what we see and to enjoy the commoner things that we inevitably will see more commonly, because they are commoner, and revel in those. And I've always found that people are extremely happy to do that. And if there's an expert also in the group, then wonderful. As you say, we learn from them. But I've found the last few trips I've gone to, there's been more than a handful of people who've come along without any binoculars. They've come along for the experience, to see what they can do. And we all lend each other our binoculars and look through the telescopes and things like that. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Andy, remind me, have you led the Christmas trip to Cyprus? Chris Peace has asked what itinerary we'll follow on the Christmas trip. Can you just sum that up quickly?
Yeah, sure. It's like a go slow, but even slower. So it's pretty much the same as a go slow, with added tinsel. So we do a little bit more pottering around. With the other ones, we do short walks and drives, but on one day probably we'll walk from the Aphrodite Hotel, which is the second hotel that we go to, which is a fabulous area, just absolutely glorious. So it's very much like the go slow. It is gentle and it is peaceful, and the two center holiday, but the two hotels are only 30, 40 miles away from each other. So it's very good fun.
Yeah, just a quick word from me on Christmas trips, because they are popular. We tend to sell out all of the trips where we lay on over Christmas, and we don't do a vast number of them. Because there aren't that many destinations in Europe where the weather is clement at Christmas, and lots of our leaders, of course, are at home with their families and not available to work. So we do tend to sell all of our Christmas trips. And the question we often get is, I mean, do you ignore Christmas? Are you catering for people that want to just get away from all of the razzmatazz and the marketing? And the answer to that is, I think we're aware that people want to get away for Christmas for lots of different reasons, some quite sensitive and emotive reasons. So what we try to do on a Christmas trip is give a due nod to Christmas and enjoy a nice Christmas dinner together, but we don't go overboard with all the high street marketing and silliness that goes on at home. So in effect, it is an escape in a way, but we still celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day, or in Portugal and Spain, it's a big Christmas Eve celebration and dinner then. So do feel free to join us. You've developed a soft spot for Cyprus, haven't you, Andy?
Definitely, I have. You're not prizing this one out of me. The Christmas trip which we've done, the dinner that we have on Christmas Day isn't a Christmas dinner at all. It's a standard sort of Cypriot meal. And most of the times when I've been, they've tended to be roughly two different kinds of people who are coming along. They are those who haven't got large families, who therefore find that Christmas can be a bit of a pain and they want to get away and relax. And then there are those who have got large families and find that Christmas can be a bit of a pain, who want to get away and relax. So.
Yeah, okay. Great. Well, no other questions. We're just coming up to 9:30 now. It's been a busy year in the Naturetrek office. If you'd have offered me this situation a year or 18 months ago, I'd have bitten your arm off, really. Coming out of COVID, the world was very insecure and uncertain from a tour operator's perspective. So we've been very happy to be busy this year. We've been happy to give word to our guides and partners around the world. And it's been great to be busy this year. We've managed to get staffing back up this year. Airports and airlines are getting back to some kind of normality after a very, very complicated 2022. But the world, as you all know, is a troubled place at the moment, and our thoughts in the Naturetrek office as we operate our holidays around the world are very much with those much less fortunate than ourselves, particularly in Israel and Palestine and in Ukraine at this moment. So thoughts are with all of those people as we enjoy relatively blessed lives and being able to get out and see some of the world's spectacular wildlife. We're also greatly enjoying Planet Earth 3, as I'm sure many of you are, 2 episodes in, David Attenborough's latest blockbuster. Some fantastic images there coming from Raja Ampat in Argentina and elsewhere, which we operate to. We'll cover those in a future seminar. Deserts and Grasslands, I think, coming up this Sunday, so we'll be keenly awaiting that. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Almost 100 of you are still on, so thank you very much for keeping us company. Hope you've enjoyed it and it's given you some inspiration and ideas for future travel. You're very welcome to contact the Naturetrek office with any questions. I'd just like to finish off by thanking very much Andy, Simon, Lara and Neil for joining us and your wonderful talks this evening. Brings back some memories for me of travels myself to the French Pyrenees in Portugal. I've really enjoyed those talks. So thank you very much. Have a safe evening, everybody, and hopefully see you in the next one. Thanks very much.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.